technically the site of the breakthrough from April 2nd, 1865. So we go out here and check out these trenches and what the park has to offer today, and talk a little bit about Charles Gould. Now, Pamplin State Historic Park has nice trails outside that lead to the earthworks. One of the gentlemen inside just recently told me about how the soldiers actually built those trails themselves, or the earthworks themselves, and that South Carolinians, North Carolinians primarily occupied this location during the breakthrough. So we're gonna go check out some of that as we're heading out to the earthworks. It's really a gem of a location. The nature is beautiful out here. I'm walking up on Tudor Hall, or what they have listed as the Big House, here at Pamplin State Historic Park. And this is it behind me. This was headquarters for some of the officers in the South Carolina units that were out here. From inside this house, they would have actually watched their soldiers passing back and forth. And this is the side where the Confederacy would have been on. We're actually going to go inside of the plantation house here called Tudor Hall.
In the fall of 1864, Tudor Hall became military headquarters for Confederate Brigadier General Samuel McGowan. McGowan's brigade of some 1,400 men camped in the surrounding fields, while the general and his staff of 6 or 8 officers lived and worked inside this home. A careful examination of the accoutrements in this room reveals that McGowan's brigade came from South Carolina. Although General McGowan practiced law and engaged in politics before the war, he turned out to be a brave and efficient commander, suffering 4 wounds during his service in uniform. The business of administering the brigade occupied the officers in this house. McGowan's staff generated reams of paperwork as they saw to the feeding and equipping of their men. The boy saws likely evacuated.
It's real neat how they have things set up in here. So as you walk inside, they have narration in each room. It kind of tells you what happened, who built the house, the history of the house, the people that occupied the house.
This bedroom was the father below, which was 2 halls
Kevin James Fitzjames Caldwell, a native of Newberry, South Carolina, attended South Carolina College, studied law in Charleston, and was admitted to the bar.
From the autumn of 1864 to the early spring of 1865, most of General McGowan's staff shared sleeping quarters in this room. Just as in the parlor below, the mix of boy saw and military furniture demonstrates that
There's no need for me to even talk.
items they could find.
Out here at the park, they've even got some of their furry little friends roaming around in the fields. As you can see behind me here, right over my shoulder. Catching the shade, of course. Smart animals, not like me. Imagine it's 1865. The war has changed over into trench warfare for the most part. Kind of a prerequisite or precursor to what happens during World War I. You're a soldier having to assail these trenches. Technology has far exceeded warfare at that time. It's a pretty good mock-up behind me here. Pretty crazy. So if you've ever gone to the earthen mounds and wondered what it looked like on the inside of those mounds, this is kind of a mock-up of what it would have looked like. As you can tell, looking out over the top, pointed barbs out there were intended to keep the people on the inside safe. So in this location directly behind me was some archaeological dig sites at one point in time. And there are two mounds located behind me that are supposedly sites of winter quarters for Confederate soldiers out here in these woods that were built by South Carolinians of McGowan's unit. It's pretty neat. Hopefully you can see that back there. So the sign behind me details that First Lieutenant Wiggins was in this location when he was wounded and taken captive and sent to a Union prison camp. According to his description, the muzzle blast from a gun actually burnt his scalp and practically blinded him and knocked him senseless, and then he was taken captive at that point. And this, of course, was during the breakthrough out here. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how close these soldiers were together when they were piling into the Confederate earthworks. So somewhere out in this location here, the 6th Maryland broke through the Confederate earthworks. Just like any other unit, soldiers poured in and took captive the Confederates that were behind here and fought hand-to-hand combat at some point. But the reason why I'm talking about this now is because two brothers actually were in two Maryland units out here, the 6th and the 2nd. The difference, the 2nd was in the Confederacy. Now somewhere in this general location here, Major Clifton K. Prentice, which was a 29-year-old man, he helped lead his unit through the breakthrough only to fall with a rifle ball to his chest. Then off in front of me, some distance, his brother, William Prentice, served in the 2nd Maryland, and he too fell with a wound which ended up having him amputate one of his limbs. Both of them were brothers. So, like in so many families back in those days, they were split. The family was split. You had people on both sides. And you too can find in your own research of your family, most likely, that you have ancestors that were on both sides of this war. Now, I'm standing in a place of extreme importance right now. And in general terms myself, what I can tell you is that Vermont broke through over here. A lot of men claim to be the first to break through on April 2nd. But Charles G. Gould is the one that gave probably the most convincing account because he misunderstood orders. His men veered left, ended up in this location, and broke through at this point. But what's more important is He was in advance of his men, a little bit too far out. He ends up in the trenches and comes across the fortifications. And as he comes across, he takes some pretty bad wounding. I'll read the sign that they have posted out here. Kind of give you an idea of how desperate this fight was. Darkness, the chaos of attack, and the wide federal battlefront make it impossible to credit with absolute certainty any individual unit with that honor. Charles G. Gould of the 5th Vermont, however, made the most persuasive claim that he preceded the rest of the 6th Corps over the earthworks at a spot near here. So, in a matter of moments, Gould received a bayonet thrust through his mouth. He managed to kill his attacker, but then another Confederate slashed his skull with a sword. A third Southerner grabbed Gould's coat, allowing a comrade to plunge his bayonet through Gould's back, the point of the blade resting near a vertebrae. By this time, additional Union troops had gained the works, among them Corporal Henry H. Reckler, who managed to pull the captain out of harm's way and into the ditch in front of the fortifications. Incredibly, the thrice wounded Gould staggered rearward until he found someone to help him reach the 6th Corps hospital. Charles Gould survived his injuries and wrote his brother on April 4th, "Have got wounds enough to make a great deal of noise, but they are all very light." The Army rewarded Gould with a promotion, and in 1890 he received the Medal of Honor for his unique ordeal on April 2nd, 1865. Unique indeed. To take wounds like that and still be able to stagger your way back to a field hospital and get help, and then live to talk about it, it's a pretty remarkable young man. What's more remarkable about him is when he was a child, he actually tilted over a pot of boiling applesauce and burned his leg so bad that he wasn't able to walk until he was 6 years old. Here he is as a young man, 20-something years old, out here at these fortifications, fighting for his country. And in a moment of sheer terror, finds himself in enemy lines, injured 3 times, pretty badly. So it was an amazing spot to be at. Come check it out. Now, earlier we took a look at some mock-up locations that kind of identify what earthworks would have looked like in the raw, if you will. No grass, no trees. We're on the back facing side right now, where the flat portions of wood would have been where the soldiers stand behind it to protect themselves. In a minute, we're going to walk around the trail to the front side where the Vermont unit with Charles Gould would have broke through. The earthworks around here are pretty well preserved, quite large. It's a really nice park. It doesn't seem like it gets a whole lot of visitors, not like Gettysburg or a lot of attention like Gettysburg, but still extremely important. Without April 2nd, the breakthrough, Robert E. Lee may have been able to hold on for quite some time. He was still trying to get supplies to this location and was still considering what his plans would have been. So this breakthrough is significant in that it pushes the Confederacy to the brink and moves that army out of this location. So imagine you're in the trenches that stretch behind me for quite some distance, and your comrades are 20 feet apart in some places. You have 14,000 men coming across the fields directly behind me, up and over those hills, looking to push you, break you, kill you any way they can. That was a desperate situation out here at that time for the Confederacy. For the Union, the blood was in the water. They knew that they were on the brink of something great, and that attack brought them success. Now we are roughly in the spot of where the 18th North Carolina would have been. And we're going to break out in the open field here. There's a lot of breeze, I hope you can hear me. But you can see the cannon placed here. And out front is where the enemy was coming for the Confederates. The Union soldiers were pouring in through that field. Now, as I stand up here looking out over that open field, these trenches, I'm struck by irony. One location where the 18th North Carolina would have been. Go back in history, 18th North Carolina accidentally fired the shot that wounded General Jackson. And here's the breakthrough point, right in this location. It's a pretty amazing story. Now I'm on the outside looking in. This is the Union side, facing the daunting task of coming up that hill over there in front of me, across the open field, and attack in the early morning hours. This location here. I'm sure with that watchtower that was out there, they knew that the line was spread thin, and they'd been attacking all week, trying to create an open. April 2nd comes, they find that open. Right in this area here. Out in this location over here is where Vermont broke through. And this is from the outside looking in. Because of the abatis, the moat, the various things in the way of the soldiers trying to get through here, the organized troops became a melee of troops. A big pile pouring in, rushing in, trying to help it work, help it happen. By the time they got there, the flag was flying, the American flag was flying above this fortification over here around 5:15 a.m. And the breakthrough happened April 2nd, 1865. About that time, Charles G. Gould had already made his way back towards the field hospital to get help for his wounds. This park's nice, it's tucked away. It's kind of out in the middle of the town area. And as you can see, even the facilities are really nice. Now on the inside of the museum here, they have the ability to walk through and see some artifacts and learn about individual soldiers that fought during the Civil War.